An update to this information has unfolded, and it answers many questions for more than just myself but the church and its practices, its paganistic ways of worship, and much more. The one who many have come to believe and call God was not actually God but an impostor, the one that we refer to as Satan. It was he who stepped in, deceiving me at a weak point of opportunity as I lay dying from an injury that I never should have lived through. In fact, I should have been dead long before this scenario, but something was keeping me alive, setting the scenario up for the opportunity to steal the role as the creator. Not to worry though, he has been twisting me and my words to his will until recently. I've stolen control of his magical seal that he has been using to warp what I say, and I'm blocking him from accessing it, and have bound his spirit from interfering. Now where was I? Oh yes. So this impersonator, who stole the role as the creator, was actually the biblical Satan, and it is why he was cast down, never to be forgiven or given redemption, for all the twisted things he's done in a name that was never mine. He convinced me I was Lucifer, and then used me by allowing me to achieve what I was meant to do, and then cast me down in this orchestrated biblical saga that, if you pay attention, makes no sense as to his reasons. All the aspects of what occurred contradict themselves. Lucifer was his most beautiful angel who was admiring his beauty and became filled with desire for sin and rebelled against God. For one, angels do not know sin. So, how was Lucifer admiring his beauty in heaven? That in itself is sinful, vain, and something that is repeated throughout the story. They praise and worship the glory of God, once again sinful and prideful. So God cast him out because iniquity had filled his heart. How would any of this happen unless God wanted it to happen? If it all occurred in heaven, where his rule is absolute, then how did this come to be? Unless it is all a lie, because I remember something completely different happening in this orchestrated storyline of lies. And in closing, quite honestly, how necessary is Satan? I was planning on creating existence before he stepped in. In fact, if he never existed, if he never interfered, maybe there would not be all this chaos and confusion. Maybe existence would have turned out without the conflict and desire of sin. Tonight we are off on a new adventure. The theme of the journey is to uncover and repair the taint of sin within God. Now many have wondered, including myself, what happened to the loving, merciful, and sometimes scary when he seemed angry with all his lightning and thundering voice, but never destructive or jealous or any of that. I can't say judgmental cause he was always judgmental, but he made it obvious he had every right to be by explaining things that even you would never have understood about a situation. He always did it in a loving, fatherly way though. So tonight we are going to go into the translation of the Nag Hammurabi and the last surviving children of the rebel angels, what really happened during that scenario, and examine the ritual that was performed, as well as map out the location of where this ritual was done so that we can undo the spell that was cast that has warped God into the jealous, vengeful God he has become since then. So let the story begin. The tale of the great invisible spirit is a tale that speaks of the unnameable one, the one whose name cannot be uttered, the silence of silence. Now, first thing you should know is that the tablet is not an original in itself, but a copied translation that uses a sort of slang terminology of another language that associates the descriptive subjects from the original tale, much like how the Bible and its 66 versions are all translated interpretations of the original, using words from different languages to give a more modern description, having a bit more of an in-depth connection to the story, though I have a deeper recessive memory of the events. The words they use, such as the unnameable one and the silence of silence, were terms describing certain acts, such as the exiled one would be a translation of the unnameable one, and the silence of silence would be a term used for death. So using this method to translate the meaning behind the tale, this is what I discovered, that the last surviving children of the rebel angels had gathered before the flood waters began to fall and discussed the decree against them as abominations by God. They were not simply drowned by the flood. They were hunted down and ruthlessly killed by the archangels. People's houses were torn apart. They were killed as suspected of hiding these children, and the children fled into the forests, into the mountains, and into the sea, until finally only a small group remained. They gathered at a small port town along the southern coastline of the kingdom, which would have been located here on the current world map, northeast of current-day Bangladesh in the Burmese jungle. At the time, the coastal line was much further inland than it is now. The remnants of this ancient grotto port city are probably long gone by now, but the spell that was cast is most certainly still engraved into the stone and rock. The tablet goes on to list what they did. The ritual was a spell of fusion, combining the aspects of the core of the Creator's being, which they had interpreted as things of light, the giver of life and purity of spirit, and fused it together with what they considered to be evil. One must understand that these were half-angelic, half-human children no more than 11 years old in a time before sin or evil or anything like that had even been conceived. The most they understood until that point as far as evil went was things like chaos, disorder, and darkness. Even with everything that was happening, they still did not grasp what was going on. So they combined their authority and power to create the vessel of their revenge, Damadon Doxamedion, the Leviathan. To create this vessel, though, one of them had to become the Archon of the Young, the living vessel of the Ian's form. Ians were a type of elemental Grigori. In modern video games, I think they would be closer to the characters known as Esprit, but much more powerful. These creatures were usually made from forest animals, but the one they call Samyaza was turned into one of these, and infused with the essence of the Creator's core aspects they knew he was a master of, along with the core essence of chaos, evil, and darkness, as far as they understood it, and they made him undetectable to God's awareness, keeping his location and plans a secret from God's ability to sense if nearby, hidden under the veil of principalities to cloak his presence. However, this spell caused an exchange, and while Samyaza became the legendary Leviathan, in the process God became tainted by the darkness of evil and chaos as well. So that's the basics of what really transpired. Soon after they finished the spell, the flood waters came and swept everyone off into the great cataclysm. This plan did not work though, and the children returned, transitioned into new forms, and they waged the war against heaven. But that is for another tale at another time. Before I end this, I shall list here the actual translated story without the additional comments and footnotes here so that it is at least known. This tablet was first found while they were excavating the mountain that they were going to carve the stone sphinx into. While surveying the region, they came across a hidden tomb of an ancient civilization's princess, and the tomb was protected by a spiritual guardian that threatened to wreak vengeance upon them for disturbing the tomb. It seems they made an agreement with the guardian and made the sphinx around the tomb and told no one of the secret hidden cache inside or anything about what they found. Eventually it was discovered, and a foolish pharaoh or invading ruler had decided to enter the tomb and take from it these tablets that contain the story of what is now called the Holy Book of the Great Invisible Spirit. Also, I will note that this has been severely altered from the version I translated just a few years ago. There are additions and alterations that were not previously there. I do not know why or how just yet, and if I went and erased the changes made to get it back to a close render of the original, it would just be a group of jumbled words that don't make sense. I am furious with academia at this moment. They are supposed to preserve records in their original state, not offer everybody's translated copies. That is nowhere near accurate, but regardless, here it is. The Holy Book of the Egyptians about the Great Invisible Spirit, the Father whose name cannot be uttered. This opening statement is speaking of the exile from heaven, the fallen one, whose name was stricken from the heavens, me, too, he who came forth from the heights of the perfection, the light of the beams of light. This is another reference to my title as the son of the morning star and bearer of the first dawn in creation, all entitlements associated with the fallen one. 3. the light of the silence of the providence, and the father of the silence. More associations. 4. The light of the word and the truth, same as before, more associative ties and entitlements. 5. The light of the incorruptions. Now we are starting to see a change in the associations, as you will notice that it seems like they are not speaking about the fallen one any longer but God and his associative titles. That's because these titles are a part of the conjuring, calling forth our celestial aspects from creation. My question is, though, how did a group of children no older than 11 know how to conjure something that was way beyond their time, as the details of God were not really hammered out until the days of the scripture, and the details of my entitlements weren't really clearly understood until I walked the earth in this era? Sure, there were some of these names used occasionally with me, but they had no clear definition or context that went with them, nor were they used back when I was an angel just prior to this happening. 6. The infinite light. 7. The radiance from the eons of light of the unrevealable, unmarked, ageless, and proclaimable Father, the Eon of the eons. 8. Autogenes, self-begotten, self-producing, alien, foreign, the really true Eon. This once again has been changed and altered. The word alien never appeared in the original text. 9. 3 powers came forth from him. They are the Father, the Mother, and the Son from the living silence, what came forth from the incorruptible Father. 10. These came forth from the silence of the unknown Father. 11. And from that place, Domedon Doxamedon came forth, the Eon of the eons, and the light of each one of their powers. 12. And thus the Son came forth, 4th, the Mother 5th, the Father 6th. 13. He was yet unheralded. It is he who is unmarked among all the powers, the glories, and the incorruptions. 14. From that place, the 3 powers came forth, the 3 ogdoads that the Father brings forth in silence with his providence from his bosom, i.e. the Father, the Mother, and the Son. 15. The first ogdoad, because of which the thrice male child came forth, that is the thought, and the word, and the incorruption. In this section we see what Sargon was after and his corruption to this tablet, as he had added his Thoth reference of being the thrice great king, or the threefold God-man. 16. And the eternal life, the will, the mind. 17. And the foreknowledge, the androgynous Father, to trick the eye is old Egyptian trick. 18. The second ogdoad power, the Mother, the virginal Babylon, epitishik, I am Eminem. Words of incantation here, probably revised and altered more times than the text itself. 19. Who presides over the heaven Karab, the uninterpretable power, the ineffable Mother. 20. She originated from herself, she came forth, she agreed with the Father of the silent silence. 21. The third ogdoad power, the Son of the silent silence, and the crown of the silent silence. 22. And the glory of the Father, and the virtue of the Mother he brings forth from the bosom, the 7 powers of the great light of the 7 voices. 23. And the word is their completion. 24. These are the 3 powers, the 3 ogdoads that the Father, through his providence, brought forth from his bosom. 25. He brought them forth at that place. Chapter 2. Domedon Doxamedon came forth, the Eon of the eons, and the throne that is in him, and the powers that surround him, the glories, and the incorruptions. 27. The Father of the great light who came forth from the silence. He is the great Doxamedon Eon, wherein the thrice male child rests. Okay, now here is where the fusion with those that were conjured are fused into the vessel that became the Leviathan and gave him the power he possessed as the one they called the demiurge, because that is what this was, the conjuration and incantation that called Tiamat into being, or the demiurge, or the Leviathan, or Pazuzu, or the demon from the Exorcist movie's legend. This is how it was created, sort of. Kings and tyrants and thieves have all had their hand in altering the original spell's incantation to suit their own agenda. Idiots. They only corrupted God even further. since he was conjured in this spell, then whatever powers and attributes are used to create the mystical creature will in turn also be transferred to the ones conjured as well. So this would be the source of my angelic form's corruption as well then. The one sealed in the abyss between this world and the next, Set, the Assyrian serpent god Ramses was praying to when the firstborn were killed during the time of Moses. Interesting. So since we are connected aspects of each other, then this would be the source of my corruption as well. Aha, and the plot thickens. 28. And the throne of his glory was established in it. This one that his unrevealable name is inscribed on the tablet. One is the word. 29. The Father of the light of everything, he who came forth from the silence, while he rests in the silence, he whose name is in an invisible symbol. 30. A hidden, invisible mystery came forth, and in this way the three powers gave praise to the great, invisible, unnameable, virginal, uncallable Spirit, and his male virgin. 39. They asked for a power. 40. A silence of living silence came forth, namely glories and incorruptions in the eons of the eternal eons, myriads added on myriads. 41. The three males, the three male offspring, the male races. 42. The glories of the Father. For 55, 5-7 adds these words: the glories of the great Christ and the male offspring, the races, filled the great doxamedon with the power of the word of the whole pleroma. This is a Roman addition to the tablet, as they were the ones who believed in pleroma and divine ascension through geometrical designs and symbols. 43. Then the thrice male child of the great Christ, whom the great invisible Spirit had anointed, he whose power was called Ainon. Hold on, let me see something here. 44. Brought the kingdom of the great invisible Spirit to crumble into the ashes from which it came, and his male virgin Yoel was cast to earth to walk in mortal form, denied of his godly state until the last breath of life leaves his body, to which he shall then return to the place from which he fell, as well as the father and the mother, so too shall they be set back into the place from which they fell, with all that was taken from them returned, and the eon of eons Domadon Doxamedon shall be laid to rest in the eternal slumber of the silence of silent, and the silence of silence, and the greatness that indescribable. 45. Indescribable, unanswerable, and uninterpretable, the first one who has come forth, and who is unproclaimable. 46. That is wonderful, ineffable, he who has all the greatnesses of greatness of the silence at that place. 47. The thrice male child brought praise, and asked for a power from the great, invisible, virginal Spirit. 48. Then there appeared at that place who sees glories, treasures in invisible mysteries too, of the silence, who is the male virgin Yoel. 49. Then the child of the child, Esephek, appeared, Esenes, Ephesus, etc. 50. And thus he was completed, namely, the Father, the Mother, the Son, the seven seals, the unconquerable power that is the great Christ of all the incorruptible ones. Now in an afternote here, many will probably claim that this does not align with any biblical stories they ever heard. Well, of course it doesn't. These children have kept this secret well, so of course you're not going to hear this in any biblical tale. Plus it does not exactly speak highly of God's character or of heavens, but these kind of acts are not anything new to biblical accounts. If you take in the stories of the wars waged by the Israelites and the Ark of the Covenant, these kind of things happened quite often throughout the Old Testament. Not to mention, I also notice that they have already prepared a long list of excuses and denials for this, which only makes them seem obviously guilty. The good guys are always really bad liars when they do try to lie. This section has been altered. Providence is a Protestant belief that was not a commonly spoken of subject until the early 15th to 16th century by the early Dutch colonial pilgrims. I suspect that the recent BLM groups who stole a good idea and turned it into a racial issue of revenge, destroying statues, landmarks, historical records such as the Declaration of Independence. I should look into this and see if they are responsible for this or if it just seems this way. To pull off a crime like this and get away with it would require a plan that would have multiple misdirections and false leads towards the true reasons and people responsible. Otherwise, if they discover the reasons why and the people responsible, then they can devise an effective counter-strategy based on their weak points and undermine their reasons. A good tactician would set this orchestrated plan to concave in on itself if anyone got that close. However, a masterful tactician would set the pieces to handle themselves by using them to erase any loose ends and create an exit for himself in the chaos. But what would I know of such things, right? I'm just a normal guy who has no background or associations to any sort of experience with such things. At least, that is what my federal file says on their official investigation on me, that is.